Everybody, good afternoon. Assalamu alaikum, and the peace and blessings of God be upon you all. I want to give you a very warm welcome to this much eagerly awaited webinar on policing hate crimes and British Muslims. We've got a jam-packed agenda. Originally, we did plan for this to be an hour long, so I will ask all the members and the attendees, because of the fantastic panelists we've got and a lot of interest from around the country, we will go a little bit over, but do please try and stay the course for the event. Just a little bit of a background into who we are, the Anti-Muslim Hatred Working Group. It was established in 2012 to consider and take forward proposals to tackle anti-Muslim hatred. It is a cross-government working group. It's consisting of 11 government departments. Alongside government officials, members are made up of representatives from various Muslim communities, independent members, experts, and academics. Our members are based there from all over the country, from Leeds, from Birmingham and Scotland, as you know. We also, importantly, have representation from outside the Muslim community. We've got representation from the Sikh community and various community-based experts. Our activities include working with communities around the UK to understand, as well as working with a range of partners to help improve the way anti-Muslim hatred is dealt with. My name is Farooq Miraz. I'm going to be your host for today. I'm an independent member of the Anti-Muslim Hatred Working Group. I'm also a member of the Ahmadiyya Muslim community. And I'm really excited to welcome you all. It's been a bit of a challenge in organizing it from Eid dates being moved and also to COVID. But I want to thank everybody who's come on today, especially the panelists and all of our members that are streaming from around the country today. Firstly, I want to get straight into it. I want to introduce all our panel members. A very quick introduction, firstly, to Coleen Wylie. She's the Chief Inspector and she heads up the Safer Communities, Equality and Diversity Division in Scotland, Glasgow. We're joined also by Lis Chapple from the SO15 Metropolitan Police Counter-Terrorism Command. Lis Chapple, the Southwest BCU Borough Commander. Paul Giannasi, the National Police Crime Advisor. Also being joined today by John Weatherhead, the local, and I'm going to get this wrong, John, so please don't hate me for it, but it's the local police liaison officer for Morden, and I'm really happy that he's on specifically to talk about some of the key things that he's put in place that have worked really well around here. Then also we've got Ahmed Owusu-Konadu, who's the Deputy President of Parma, UK, a spokesman for the Ahmadiyya Muslim community in Scotland. He's done a lot of work behind the scenes as well and works very closely with authorities there. David Shire, hopefully we will be seeing him some point. He's the Equality and Diversity Projects Officer for Nottingham Police. And Gurmit Kaur, the Community Cohesion Coordinator for Nottingham Police. And our dear friend, an independent member, Mufti Ahmed Peerbhai as well. He's very experienced. He's also a police chaplain as well, and deals with a lot of the police liaison in the Midlands and the Nottingham area. So thank you to all of our panelists who are joining us today. I'm going to get straight into it. We've got a really jam-packed agenda. I'm just going to give a quick how the day is going to flow. We've got some questions for all of our panel members, and also we've got a specific section later on, and that's going to especially be headed up by Mufti Ahmed. Mufti Sahib, just as a background, was going to run an event, a regional event similar in Nottingham. We managed to convince him to come onto this one, more of a national one. So there's going to be some questions specifically based around from the Midlands and Nottingham area as well. So we'll be coming onto that a bit later. All of our viewers from around the country, we have been receiving your questions and we're going to be reading them out. Do bear with us, and please do, all of our attendees, keep coming back with our questions. This is a really, it's going to be a really exciting event, so hopefully you can stay for the duration. We're going to kick right in, and my first question we have, she came on late to the panel, but we're really excited to have Coleen Coleen, Chief Inspector for Safer Communities. Hi, Coleen, how are you doing?
Hi, Farooq. I'm very good, thank you.
Now, Coleen, you've got a vast experience working out of Scotland and Glasgow with, especially I know very well from Ahmed, but quite a few of the Muslim communities. Tell us about some of the issues that you've faced over the years in building relationships and trying to tackle anti-Muslim hatred up north from Scotland.
Okay, thank you, Farooq, and thank you for inviting me to join. It's just a shame I can't join you visually, but we'll improvise meantime. So really, Please Scotland, as you can imagine, we have many diverse communities, and we're really, really determined that as an organisation we do our best to engage and understand, the issues that face all our communities. I appreciate your question specifically around about the Muslim community. And in particular, some of the challenges that we face that I imagine are probably not unique to Scotland are, the underreporting of hate crime. We do believe that there are many reasons and barriers that people not report hate crime. But it's only by reporting it that we can truly understand the scale and the type of issues that communities are facing, so that we can then tackle these, effectively and work to protect and support victims. Some of the work that we do to really try and counter this and encourage communities, all communities, to report hate crime or hate concerns is through, those local contacts we have, local officers on the ground, continuing to engage with our various community groups, our different organisations, through mosques at various levels, really just, again, trying to encourage people to report concern. And we understand that, the reporting directive police may not be the way that people feel comfortable reporting hate crime, albeit that's the way that we would encourage the reporting. We try to get across there are other methods in Scotland of reporting hate crime, such as through third-party reporting centres. So there's a number of ways that we've tried to sort of resolve or overcome the underreporting of hate crime through hate crime campaigns, really trying to get awareness of the impact that it does have on the wider communities and wider society, the impact it can have on victims and their families, and actually involve different communities in the sort of design and the content of the campaigns, really just to make sure that we optimise the messaging we get out there, so that people firstly understand what that is hate crime I'm experiencing, and again to encourage them to report it too, so that we can then tackle it more effectively.
I'm really interested in one of your points that you've raised there, Coleen, about working really closely with the Muslim communities in first knowing how do you report these issues? What is a hate crime that's very specific to a Muslim or a mosque? What's the tools that you've used in your experience up in Scotland, so we could utilise that around the country?
For engagement to report hate crime?
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I suppose it's routinely, as I said, obviously coronavirus at the moment is like everywhere, is impacting how we can engage, but it's adapting, and it's electronic means, it's keeping in contact, making it routine that with different communities and different groups we build up, we sort of reach out and we build up those relationships and those contacts. We also, through third-party reporting on our website, that is established that different people in different communities may have another preferred way to report hate crime. So through the third-party reporting section of the Please Scotland website, we have set up our arrangements in every local authority where members of the public can, through agencies or a local authority agency or a third sector agency, they can report concerns to a third party. That third party can then provide advice. Staff are given training and support how to recognise hate crime, and they can then either encourage a member of the public or they can report it directly to the police through the reporting section of our website. So that's been, that's been a good tool in recognising that for various reasons people may not want to report direct to the police, but we just want to know about it, so there are other routes to report hate crime to the police.
Wonderful. So the key message there, I think, for everybody is, even if you feel there isn't a need to report it, it could be however small or however big, report it, log it, make sure that the police are aware. Thanks a lot, Coleen, and we will come back to you slightly later. So again, thank you so much for coming on board last minute, and we'll come back to you shortly with some questions as well.
Absolutely, thank you.
And moving on now to a good friend of the working group, and that's Paul Giannasi. Paul's the National Police Crime Advisor. We've worked closely within the group for a little while now, and I really wanted to bring Paul in. And Paul, I'll ask you, what are the problems that you faced on a national scale with regards to anti-Muslim hatred? What are the real concerns out there, and what are the roadblocks in building an effective relationship so a mosque can feel comfortable in reporting issues and incidences?
So I think I'd echo what Coleen just said in relation to this sort of challenge. We followed a similar path with Scotland and the rest of the UK since the Stephen Lawrence inquiry really brought hate crime to notice. It changed policing in the most significant way during my 30-year police career, and in particular in hate crime, it set the foundations for everything that's happened since. And you talked about underreporting, and between 2009 and 2019 in England and Wales, the comparison between the crime survey, which measures people's experience of hate crime, and the crime recorded statistics, effectively says that we went from 1 in 6 hate crimes being recorded to 1 in 2. And that echoes what Coleen was saying about third-party reporting, about mechanisms like True Vision, which allow people to report online direct to the police. We've made great strides in that. There are some particular challenges relating to the Muslim community that sort of would be significant. I'll kind of wheel them off and then maybe kind of talk about any in detail. But one of the fundamental challenges in the UK, similar to in Western Europe, similar to in probably most of the Northern Hemisphere, is the level of hostility towards Muslims is probably greater than any other community. There are other communities who suffer more hate crime, kind of perhaps per individual, but the level of organised hostility at an ideological level has a greater concentration on Muslims at this time in our history than most other communities. And historically that hasn't always been the case, but certainly that is my experience currently. There is a number of reasons for that. There is perhaps less generational integration than some communities living in the UK who've been here for 2 or 3 generations longer on average. The fact that a higher proportion of Muslims are from a minority ethnic background makes them kind of doubly stand out as both religiously a minority and an ethnic minority. We know that traditionally the levels of trust have been a challenge for us in policing, and getting people to have the confidence to report hasn't always been there. And one of the kind of difficulties is, unlike some communities, there isn't a clear hierarchy of the community. There isn't a single leader at a theological or a community level who can claim and be accepted as the leader of the Muslim community. So instead of speaking to one person and kind of having the machinery pass messages up and down, the work to build relationships up with the Muslim community is much more challenging, and it requires much more effort to receive the same protection. And I just kind of universality of protection is absolutely key to this. It's the mantra that we trot out at every opportunity. And we all have a right to live a life free from targeted abuse, and that is an equitable right. And that universality is a key issue, that we have to put more resources in where the demand is greatest. And it's like the kind of question of a fire brigade aren't going to send a a fire tender to my house if yours is on fire. You've got to deal with the problem where it is. So consequently, our efforts to build relationships have perhaps been greater with the Muslim community than most communities in the last 10 years at least. But it is a community that is harder to universally reach. We've got examples where we've had to work really hard to get messages out because of that lack of a single structure.
It's really interesting you say that, Paul. Are you finding this lack of singularity, if you like, with contact with communities? Is that causing an issue between them? Do you think that's a key issue between the police and the Muslim community?
I think it's something we have to work at, and we have to recognise where there is challenges. I once had a conversation with a Grand Mufti, I won't say which country from, but we were talking about kind of this very issue, and his stance was that kind of in his view and in his teaching, human rights is really important and it's second only to religious teaching. We would argue, and I would argue personally, that if it's not over the top of everything, it is not human rights. And if there is if there's anything that is above it, then it doesn't work as human rights. So that kind of issue about people's understanding and the sort of challenge of those, the kind of sectarian challenges that have existed in parts, not just in the Muslim community, but in the Christian community in Northern Ireland, for instance, are issues that we have to understand, we have to grapple with, and we have to work with communities in a serious and constructive way to overcome the challenges that sometimes exist in every community.
Thanks, Paul. And we will be coming back to you a little bit later. We've got some specific questions you're going to be pleased to hear for yourself later. So thanks again for that, and then we'll come back to you shortly. My next question, I'm going to ping this over to Gurmit. Hi, Gurmit. How are you doing?
I'm fine, thank you.
Now, specifically in the role that you deal in your expertise with regards to hate crimes, are you seeing the rise of hate crimes, and how are you tackling specifically Muslim-related hate crimes that are affecting the various Muslim groups?
Okay, can I just go through a little bit of a background with myself so people have got some sense? Very much like Paul, I'm a retired inspector. My sort of fruitful engagement with the community, in particular with the Muslim community, is when I was working in a very diverse community in the city of Nottingham. Within a walking distance, we had about 8 or 9 mosques. And when I took this role, there was clear lack of engagement. There was a clear issues around high in crime in all aspects, in particular around the hate crime. It was to do with prevalent was around Ramadan. There was no communication between the police, or should I say it was limited, because obviously I can't talk on behalf of the predecessor, but it was limited when I took over. And it was obviously clear when we talk about thinking out the box, and Paul talked about the hierarchy. They all, and I'm very much into meeting the needs of individual mosques, individual communities, but clearly a collective voice. We set up what was called, as they're known as, the Muslim Consultative Group meeting within that city, and through that good practice, they all came together, raised the issues collectively. And as we talked about demand needed, where do we put those resources, they were able to understand that each neighbourhood policing area will have a bespoke plan for those individual needs. Some mosques didn't want visible presence, some did. Unfortunately, we were able to make a couple of arrests over the early years. So that will just give you a foundation where I am. Sure. When we talk about cohesion, and we talk about hate crime in particular, yes, there has been an increase in crime. I've got one of my, like I said, before we opened up the event, a member of our Notts Police, member of hate crime staff, Marta, and hopefully Marta will be able to chip in if I miss anything out. We are seeing an increase, and in what we see that as a good sign, because that shows us we're actually engaging well, as well as identifying hotspots. So regards to that, yes, we are engaging, we're picking up. We talked about how do we get that message around hate crime in particular. We've actually had very, should I say, vocal individuals talking about the lack of investigation by the police and not getting information out swiftly. So what I want to talk is around the effectiveness of how we made that communication more effective. We've set up what is called as a key contacts database, a partnership contacts database. So when we have information around an incident, and particularly around the national global incident, we know it's going to raise fear and scarce around the local, and it's getting that information out swiftly and trying to myth bust information. So I think we in Nottingham, and hopefully Mufti Ahmed will sort of support me, I do see we've made a tremendous improvement in relationship building with our Muslim community. We've networked, and you know that to me shows the productivity we've done, and which now from Muslim Consultative Group meeting, and I think Mufti will mention, they've now moved around Council of Mosques, so that's now given ownership back to the mosque to take the lead rather than the police, whereas we as the police were taking the lead because we actually had our PCC chairing those meetings and we were listening to them. So now what we want to do, we want to go to the community and listen to what they feel we need to be directed, which is what I believe in, empowering the community.
Now that's great, Gurmit, and I was going to take this to another speaker, but I think it's really, I think at this point, if Mufti Sahib, if I could bring you in, Mufti Ahmed, and because I think off the back of this, tell me from you're at the other end of the scale there now, from where Gurmit's working from, and she's done a lot of fantastic work. What are the challenges that you are facing, and specifically in Nottingham and in the Midlands area, and how has that changed since your relationship, and what some of that good practices that we can take on board as well?
Okay, thanks, Farooq. Yeah, so I'd like to echo a lot of what Gurmit mentioned, and yes, she said that I hope she's saying that I hope I would support her, and definitely I am supporting her in this, that there was a lack of engagement prior to her taking the role, and she's done a lot. She's earned a lot of credibility in the community. This is why we invited her today. And she does go out of her way to ensure that the Muslim community do feel that they are listened to. So for me, I think one of the most important elements of policing and community relations is that engagement. I understand engagement has to work both ways, and I also accept what Paul Giannasi mentioned about it's not always very straightforward to deal with the Muslim community because of diverse backgrounds and sometimes ideological differences. However, I do think there are ways to move forward, although we have these kind of ideological differences. That shouldn't be an obstacle. And I think in Nottingham, we found a way to do that. So we've got the Nottingham Council of Mosques. And I think there has to be a will from the police to engage seriously. I'm not sure that, I'm not saying that police don't have that will, but where there is a strong will, then those issues of diversity within the Muslim community will become minute and minuscule, and they'll become insignificant. But where there's not that will, then these issues will seem to be more significant than they really are. But talking about the consultative group, so Gurmit knows I am part of the consultative group, and I hope David will talk about this during his few minutes, about how that consultative group has now evolved into a scrutiny panel, which the PCC will chair. And I hope also to engage with the police and PCC on that level. So it's about engagement, and when the community, I'm not talking about just the Muslim community, but minority communities, when they feel that they are listened to and they have a clear structure to escalate issues and concerns, then that gives them confidence. Because without trust and confidence, you're not going to have good community relations. So for me, it's that where there is a clear structure to escalate issues and concerns, then that is a very big step forward to develop and strengthen community relations.
Thank you, Ahmed. And we were going to come back to you shortly later as well for some questions specifically from Nottingham as well, and with David as well. But I want to naturally now back over to from one great example and work being done really effectively on the ground in Nottingham between Mufti Ahmed and also Gurmit to the southwest. We're coming back into London now to speak to Lis Chapple. Liz, hi Liz, are you on?
I am, yes.
Hey Liz. And firstly, I want to thank you hugely for coming on board. I know you haven't been in the job long. You took over from Sally Benneter very recently. Right. Sally, who I know very well, the Ahmadiyya Muslim community has got a really good working relationship with your BCU. And I think this is a perfect time to bring you in, actually, and to talk about a lot of your, but firstly, tell us a little bit about your background, and also tell us a little bit about how you see the picture in your borough and how it can be improved, and also a lot of those good practice. How can we share with that with the country as well?
Yeah, certainly. Let me talk first, and then you might want to bring in John or another colleague to to it. So good afternoon, everyone. Really delighted to be with you and to be asked to take part in this. So I'm the Chief Superintendent who leads the Southwest Command Unit, which is four boroughs in the southwest of London. As the facilitator said, I've been in the job a week, so well done to me for surviving the first week. So, but actually the role that I had just before I came in was in Scotland Yard in the central community engagement team, and the issues that we're talking about today were raised to a significant extent during COVID. That was really quite a difficult time, I think, for lots of communities in terms of, community cohesion, how we all live together and interact together across London. So had lots of conversations with different communities this year to understand how they're feeling. And I think that picks up on a point that, that I made very well from a national perspective, which is that I can sit here and I do have in front of me that the figures for all hate crimes, but for the Met and the Southwest, and also the Islamophobic hate crimes as well. But we just are so aware how the figures only tell part of the story. They don't tell us the impact, and sometimes the disproportionate impact that hate crimes have on different communities. And I know that some speakers today have said, it's great that reporting is going up, so the stats are going up, which means that people are more confident to report. And I just would say that that may well be true, but it may also be true that if the stats are going down, then we need to recognise there is some good practice, as you say, that we can share. And I think the only way we can really get behind it is by the Met loves its statistics, and for anyone that's interested, just kind of put into Google or your favourite search engine, Met Police stats, and it will bring you up with a wealth of information, including a dashboard that will give you really granular detail on all of the different hate crimes in different areas of London and across London. So do have a look at that. But the only thing we can really do is to, as well as looking at statistics, also stay really close to communities. And if we're not hearing those stories, because it's always the stories that matter, isn't it? It's the families that have been affected by it. It's how children feel walking to school, if they're going to be attacked even verbally, based on their race. It's those things that we need to hear and have colour, and that helps us talk to people in power who can change this, about how things can be different. Community cohesion is really, really important to me. So we've seen, particularly with hate crime that affects the Muslim community, how greatly it's affected, and by not only things that are happening in the UK, but also world events, and how that can cause a great swell of sometimes hatred against different communities, which is utterly unfair. And I think our best defence to that is to work together consistently and build cohesive and resilient communities, so that if unfortunately there are these significant events, then we can stand together and be stronger. And I think the last point that I want to make before you might want to go to a colleague for what we've been doing in Southwest is that the best thing that we can do is to increase understanding between how we approach things from a policing perspective and how the community are feeling. So the more information I can give my officers and staff about Muslim communities, that is going to increase their understanding on the streets, understanding what people's received experiences in families, and I think that's, you know, much for the better. And then the more we can give our communities, our Muslim communities, on how we approach this, that will increase the trust that you'll have. So when I was looking at the figures for this call, I think I'm really confident that the majority of our officers take this extremely seriously, take hate crime extremely seriously, and we have a brilliant network of staff in both Scotland Yard and in the BCUs who work on hate crime day in, day out. What I'm less comfortable with is how many of the hate crimes we're solving at the moment. And I think that the way that we can increase that is by, again, renewing the community's faith in us and getting that information in from the communities, which will help us solve them. So again, thank you for the opportunity to speak today. Really important issue, and I'm passionately behind it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Liz. I really appreciate that. And again, I'm really happy that you're on, because from a personal level, it's my borough, and I've seen a lot of the good work that's gone on over the last 10 to 15 years to get where we are. So naturally, that's going to bring in my good friend, John Weatherhead. Hi, John. John, I've known for quite some time, but where John's and his team have done some fantastic work, specifically with the Bathurst Mosque here in Morden, and some of the nearby mosques as well, is building that relationship. And it's almost to a level of a partnership, for want of a better phrase. So, John, tell us a little bit about when you first came into this role. What kind of issues did you face on the ground, and how did you tackle them? And what kind of advice can you give to all the other officers and Muslim groups around the country?
Good afternoon, everybody. Initially, when I first came to the borough, I came in from the dog section. Due to my knees, I was no longer needed. I came to the borough, and although the mosque was on my ward, I'm a dedicated ward officer for Merton Park. Although the mosque was on our ward, another ward was, if you like, not running the show, but helping out down there. Me being a bit of a control freak, I thought, hang on a minute, there must be more that we can do. It is on Merton Park's ward, so I said no. We'll have the mosque back, and then began to, if you like, forge relations with yourselves. That for me, I think, was key. Breaking down barriers and stereotypes, and making it a bit more personal. If someone can see a friendly face, a name to a uniform, then hopefully they'll be more likely to approach me or the organisation through me, and we can move forward. And I think we have done, as Farooq said, some fantastic work with regards to relations.
So what would you put that down? I know Liz spoke about some of the key points I picked up on was relationships building, understanding each other a lot better. They're the keys to break down. I mean, not just between the Muslim community and the police, but any form of relationship needs that breakdown and communication. What tools did you utilize, and what would you encourage other officers who are listening in, and also other members of our mosques around the country? What tools can they utilize?
I think you need to gain each other's trust. You know, we both have stereotypes. I should imagine we both have stereotypes of each other. But until you actually, it sounds cliche, until you actually start talking to people, you then start to understand what they're about, and you build up these relationships. It's a two-way street as well. It's not just the Muslim community, how they perceive the police. It's the other way as well. It's a two-way street, and that's how, if you like, we went about it, or I definitely went about it. You go in, ask questions, ask who the pictures on the wall, ask who they are. It starts so simply, and I think I came onto the borough about 8 years ago, off the top of my head, and I think during that time we've created a real bond, like the trust, and I would like to think that many of the community down there could approach me or my colleagues and feel comfortable in talking to us. I mean, we are always greeted really well down there, down at your mosque. We're always greeted really well, and I don't think we've had any issues as such regarding trust or wanting to speak to us. I think we've had some real success, and I do believe that dedicated ward officers on every borough that has a mosque or a community centre should be getting involved and should be building up these relationships.
Thanks, John. I really appreciate that, and I can't say enough good about the work that you do and your colleagues do here in the BCU. It's not taken for granted, and thank you, my friend, for joining us.
Thank you.
I want to dart over to another dear friend of mine, someone who's fantastic at his job. I've lucky enough to know for a very long time, and that's Lis Chapple. Lis Chapple works in the SO15, the Metropolitan Police Counter-Terrorism Command. He's done a lot of work, I know personally, over the years in community engagement. But just, if you can, Lee, firstly, welcome. How are you, my friend?
Hi, I'm well, thank you. Thanks for the invite for today. It's great to be a part of this. Community engagement is the key to policing, so I'm really pleased to be involved.
I think you just encapsulated your answer perfectly.
Well done, I'm done.
If I can ask you, Lee, you've been, for want of a better term, you've been in this for a long time. I know a lot of the work that you've been done. We've known each other for over 10 years. What are your success stories around the Met, especially in the area that you work in? And what secrets can we take away? What little gifts can we take away around the country to utilize? How can we break down those barriers to really have a good working partnership with the police, so the Muslim community can feel trusted, wanted, known that at the other end of the phone, it's not just going to be an empty word, but their concerns are really going to be looked at. Tell us some of the work that you've done and what other Muslim communities can utilize.
Thanks, Farooq. I just explained my team, really. My team was set up in 2005 following the London bombings. And the role of the team was to link in with visible ethnic minority groups who would have concerns about the policing of London after a terrorist attack. And that went really well. So you'd have, where you have communities that were concerned about what was going to take place on the streets of London, and you had the police who were trying to police London after such a horrific event. And we were in the middle and explained procedure and also what was likely to take place. And it actually reduced and removed a lot of the tensions between the communities, which really sums up a lot of things that both John and other colleagues on here have been saying. Is the talking and understanding and explanation of what's being done with the police and talking to each other. So my team did that in 2005 and it carried on. And at the time it was felt that it was a really good way of engagement. So my team's a strategic engagement team. We're not on so much on a local BCU or borough level. We're on a strategic level across London. And actually that spreads a bit further than London. If our contacts then lead us outside of the M25, then we will deal with them as well. And the whole role is about longevity, continuity of engagement, working with people. As Farooq said, I've known Farooq over 10 years, and it came from me finding out about an event in Hampshire from the community, and it was Joust Solana, a community event taking place. I didn't know about it, and I didn't know anybody else who was looking at it or engaging with the group, so I did. And as a result of that, I became, I think, a friend of Farooq's and a friend to the community. And from that, I was able to get an understanding of different community groups, including the Amity group, and then share that knowledge with other police officers and other organisations. So it's a learning process for us. We need to know about community groups, and we only get that by talking. And also, if the public and community talk to us and learn what we do and what we can do. I had a conversation with a leader from the Jewish community just before this webinar, and we were talking about an event coming up, High Holy Days, at the end of this month. And we were talking about the issues there are around policing and events. And we both came to the simple view that it's simple community engagement, old-fashioned policing and talking to each other and just getting an understanding of what each of us are about. And it seems to work really well. And I think that's the structure that my team's developed. All of my team within my office have different geographic responsibility for a community. And we monitor what goes on globally and see how it's going to impact on the community in London. Then we contact strategic leaders for the communities, find out what's needed, and then try and implement it or work with the community to get over any barriers or issues that they experience.
That's greatly. I can't speak highly of you enough, to be honest with you. The work that you do, and it's not just with our communities. I know you. It's that goes very, very wide. I was lucky enough to be at our mosque, and you came down with the Met Commissioner, who spoke specifically about this subject. That the keys to she actually leant over and said to me, the key to resolving a lot of your issues, in her perspective, is doing it the way you're doing it, building relationships from the ground level up, going to your borough level.
Sorry to interject. I think there's one last thing that I'd like to mention is that we're very bad at selling ourselves. The police in general, we receive a lot of negativity in different areas, and the positives never really come out. We held an event, myself and a colleague, Sadie Junkel, we held an event for women's engagement. They're not police officers, they were just members of the community representative women's groups, but also present were a collection of officers from across the south of the country. And we invited 2 work experience girls from various parts of London. They came in as part of the women's group, but also came just to see what the police do. We had a meeting at Scotland Yard. The 2 girls sat in on the meeting. We talked about things that we could talk about while they were present. And at the end of it, we really just had a meeting. It was a meeting we've had 4 times a year with our partners. And the 2 girls were asked at the end what they thought about the meeting. And they were gobsmacked that the police actually, their work being done in the background to support communities, which they had no idea about. And they were so overwhelmed, they said they were going to go away and talk about it. And actually it gave them a whole new perspective and understanding of what the police service does. So that, just by 2 people turn up to a meeting and seeing what we do, they found out stuff that we took for granted that people might know about, but actually they don't. So that, I just wanted to get that example in, because it was just we just had 2 girls come along, and from that, I mean, I asked them what the best bit of the meeting was, and they came out with various scenarios, and I said to them, without it sounding cheesy or corny, but the best bit of that meeting for me was their response and what they said about what we do behind the scenes for community groups. And I was blown away, and I've used that example a lot, because I think we do sell ourselves short sometimes. There's a lot of work done in the background with community groups. There's a lot of individuals, there's a lot of organisations that we work with, and it never really gets aired or put into the public domain. So I think my last thing is just let's all talk to each other and look at the positives and not the negatives, and try and get things going and get things make the place a better place. Another cheesy line, but that's, in essence, that's what we want, to make the world a better place.
No, you're right, Lee. I know we talk about this on a personal level a lot.
Yeah.
It's a very basic yet I think it's a fundamental aspect of building a relationship, communication, constant communication and trust, as pointed out by John and also Liz as well. I'm going to now go up north again, and I'm going to bring in Ahmed Owusu-Konadu and ask, hi Ahmed, how are you doing? Before I ask you, how are you doing today?
Good. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining us. Ahmed does a lot of work. I've been lucky enough to know Ahmed for many years. He just put his name down, but I just a lot of the work that he does, he works with the police all year round. He's also the Deputy President of Parma, UK. He's the Regional Coordinator for the Charity Walk of Peace. I mean, I could go on for a while, so I'm not going to bore you. I'm going to get right into the question for you, Ahmed, which is, a lot of the work, you work very closely with the police in Glasgow. I know you have been for the last 10, 15 years. Tell us some of the examples where you've had some tough times, but you've also had a lot of good times, and how did you manage to get to the good place as well?
Thank you. I guess I would first of all say, as a member of the Ahmadiyya Muslim community, the dynamic is a bit different with us, because we have one global leader who is the spiritual head, Hazrat Mirza Masroor Ahmed, the Khalifatul Masih, and that makes it a bit different with us in all our approach, because whatever I'm going to tell you now, if you happen to go to every Ahmadiyya branch in the world, you tend to see similar things actually happening. Yes, difficulties that we face, I would probably say difficult times just before, period before the incident of Asad Shah. And then obviously at that time, we rallied together with the police, and we managed to overcome all the odds, and we'll be moving on from there. But even before that, I guess a lot of things have been happening with the Ahmadiyya Muslim community and the police. Myself, I don't want to mention my name, because obviously I represent the Ahmadiyya Muslim community in whatever I do, and whatever I do is actually what the community and then the leader has actually taught us, the Khalifatul Masih. Ahmadiyya Muslim community is quite good at it, and I guess I've heard, I think Lee has mentioned, I think John has also mentioned it as well, and that is engagement. Engagement is the key. Community engagement is the key to a lot of this breaking barriers, especially with the Muslim community. The Ahmadiyya Muslim community, right from the younger age, always think of trying to give to the community and always trying to support whatever good is in the community. And we see the police as our friends, because we know they are trying to achieve the same goal that the Ahmadiyya Muslim community want to achieve in the community. So it's like we have a common something to achieve here. The police want to achieve peace. The Ahmadiyya Muslim community is there for peace as well. In fact, Islam is actually there for peace. So some of the activities that we've done, obviously, it's we've had a very strong relationship with the police, because, like I said, they are our friends. We want to, and right from day one, from the childhood, from the youth group, we try to educate them, try to let them understand that police are not their enemy. Unfortunately, when you look at the Muslim community, we tend to come from the minority groups, and a lot of us actually come from some kind of countries where policing is a bit different. The police is actually seen as a bit of an enemy. So if we are in the United Kingdom, we don't start educating the youth right from childhood that no, they are our friends. They're actually there to protect us. They are there to help us achieve something good in the community, then eventually leads to something bad. And that is where you see the Ahmadiyya Muslim community right from childhood. The youth groups have got very strong link with the police. We bring them into the mosques at almost all the youth events. They are there to talk to the youth. They have, every career event that we organize, the police are there to talk about police careers that they have, so that even some of these minority groups, some of us would be able to engage and also get into the policing as well. We have a very good relationship with them, and some of them are that also every borough or whatever community that we find ourselves, we always try to find our police inspector. Coleen, if Coleen is still on the line, she'll let you know that we'll always invite them to the mosque. And in fact, every year we have an event where we bring all the police areas normally about 30 odd police will be to the mosque. And all we are trying to do is trying to also educate the police about what Muslims and how they live their lifestyle, so that when they get out there and they meet the police, they'll be able to interact with them in the best way. Because at times, you know, it's just about some small things that you might do in the police community, in the Muslim community, which might spark certain things, an enemy for the police as well. So we also find a way of trying to educate them all the time, so that they know that when we are going to the Muslim community, A, B, C, D are things that when we do, we can get them to win our trust. And A, B, C, D are things that we do when we're pushing them away. We have regular peace conferences, so many events. I mean, I can go on, and every time that we have any event of whatever nature, we bring the police in. So the police are more or less like our friends, and that's how we see them. So
I think
yes.
So that's the key. What you mentioned right there, I think you're encapsulating what Lee, John, and also Liz are saying. We have to, and it's interesting that you say that from a very early age, where, you know, we liaise with the police very directly. It's a very open policy. I think that's the key message there as well. We have to understand each other, know our what makes us tick, what makes us work, what upsets us, as a natural relationship does. So thank you for that, Ahmed. I really appreciate that. I will come back to you again. I'm trying to speed things along, because we've got so many questions that are flooding in, and I keep looking at the side, and there's more and more questions as we go along. I want to now, again, like I mentioned at the start, we have Mufti Ahmed Peerbhai Sab on from Nottingham. He was going to do an event in a regional event for the Nottingham area and the Midlands area, but we managed to convince him to come on and combine with this event. And before he comes, is David Shire on, Mufti Sab, do you know?
Yeah, he's on. I think because of the security element, the Zoom cannot be. I think you can't join in through Zoom. Okay. So that's why the number on the screen. That's David there.
David, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. We can hear you perfectly. How are you, sir?
I'm great, thank you. Thank you for inviting me, and thank you for it's a great debate going on.
Thank you, sir. I want to dive straight in. If you can give us a little bit of a background into yourself, but also on the back of that, I want you to let everybody know what's the importance of community cohesion and the importance of working together. That's the kind of vibe we're getting from all of the speakers at the moment. So give us a little bit of background about yourself and how you deal with some of these issues.
From the off, I just want to remind everybody that a few days ago was the anniversary of Martin Luther King's that major speech and that march in the United States. And one of the things that basically sits with me around that, the kind of speeches that Martin Luther King has had, is the phrase, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. So much so that I believe that one of the ways in which we can improve engagement is to recognize that the hate crimes, particularly the impact it has on the Muslim communities, is a threat to everyone else, so that the solution does not necessarily have to come from just the community, Muslim community itself being either easy to access or not easy to access. But what we need is to have something of a platform for constructive expression of discontentment. And I say that as part of the work that I used to do before. I used to run a race equality council in the Southwest. As a man of African origin, in the Southwest, in the county where I used to run a race equality council, there were not that many Africans, but there were quite a few Muslim communities who are not of African origin, but mostly from the Middle East. And the issue then that came to me was that there was a concern about a mosque which is in the center of this big city in the southwest. For those of you who want to know, I'll tell you where it is later on. In the southwest, they wanted to have an extension to their mosque, and then the council planning committee and the police sat together with the Muslim community and said, well, we're concerned about you expanding it because it's going to cause traffic jam, right? And there was no community support for a minority Muslim community for just basically trying to seek planning permission. They were not seeking money. They had their own money. They just wanted to expand it. So myself, as the leader of the Race Equality Council, I was basically able to go back to the council and say, look, I'm a father of two. On one side of my street, I've got a building known as Spearmint Rhino. I'm happy to say this. This is a true story. Spearmint Rhino on one side of my street. And on a Friday, on the other side of my street was this little mosque that people wanted to expand so that people didn't have to pray on the streets. And the council was more concerned about peaceful people who were praying on a Friday afternoon rather than men who were going into this men's club called Spearmint Rhino on a Friday. This is true. And some of them were council employees. And I spoke for 10 minutes and the whole debate changed. The reason I'm saying this, I'm mentioning this, is that it's incumbent upon all of us, regardless of whether we are or we are not of a particular faith, to defend that which we think is rightful. In this particular instance, I take the view that faith and race and discrimination is a moral issue, not a political issue. And that is how then I extended that sort of vision to the work that I now do for the Police and Crime Commissioner. What I've done with the Police and Crime Commissioner was to say to him, which he fully acknowledges now, that what we want is to find a system that allows community voices, however small, to be escalated to either him or the chief constable. Because often what happens is that people with the loudest voices or communities that are more established or the communities that tended to be listened to, they tend to be the only communities that get listened to, rather than to say every single voice matter. As I said at the beginning of this conversation, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. So we decided we needed to set up a listening group that effectively sits as an organization where people can have their issues escalated to, and then if they can escalate the issues from the listening group, they can escalate the issues to the Police and Crime Commissioner as well as the force. And what then is happening now is that we're able to communicate whatever it is that's happening within the force, whatever the support that's available to the force, including hate crime reporting, including the statistics on recruitment. Today, I've just received a whole lot of statistics on how well we are doing in relation to recruiting BAME into our force. And that information will go straight to the listening group, and it will go down straight to the little guy in the street, regardless of what faith they come from. To finally make the final point about this, the main approach that we're taking is a nuanced approach. We don't necessarily try to separate the communities into, say, at the moment we've got Black Lives Matter issue, for example, and then you separate the black community, and then the next day we talk about hate crime, and then we forget about the other issues. What we try to see is to look at it in a holistic fashion, but also in a nuanced fashion, as opposed to saying, well, these issues are more important than another. Because at the minute we are having a debate across the country around Black Lives Matter, and consequently, a lot of the issues around hate crime are being put on a back burner because we haven't taken ownership as a whole community about the hate crime and what's happening to some of the communities.
Well,
hello.
Yep, David, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you now. Yeah.
I really appreciate that input, and I think you've come in. It's perfect timing, and you've highlighted a lot of concerns and issues. And I want to ask you one quick question before we move to Mufti Sab. How do you foresee the next short-term to long-term goals, if you like, for yourself, and how you to tackle some of these issues and the concerns that you brought up?
Well, the first thing that we are now able to debate within the listening group is around challenging three areas, strategic areas. The first thing is about the narrative. I mean, one of the speakers touched on it. Like, for example, what's happening globally has a significant impact, particularly on the Muslim community. You have to ask yourself, what is it that's causing people to psychologically feel comfortable attacking one particular religion over another, right? And it has to be around the narrative that we are accepting as a people. So the way in which we are trying to evolve within the listening group is to see how we can influence the narrative, not just internally, but externally, so that at least it doesn't become the narrative of others, but it is all our values and narratives that we create ourselves. So that's one thing. The other thing is about stats. I think a lot of people were talking about statistics on the hate crime, that whether or not it's gone up or not. I think one of the other things that has happened more recently with police statistics is that there's been an improvement in the recording of hate crime. And so consequently, one of the things that the listening group is trying to do is to create a scrutiny panel within that, a scrutiny panel composed of Black and Asian professionals, not lay people from the community. What we want the community to have the trust and confidence that the statistics that they're receiving, they're properly vetted by those people who have the best interest, their best interest. This is not to say that the police don't have the best interest of the people. The trust and confidence is more about emotional feelings, how people feel. So what we want to do is to have people who have not got axe to grind with the police, people who have no arguments with the police whatsoever, but they're professionals, but they also have lived experience of discrimination and racism, to be able to scrutinize the stats to see what exactly are the gaps in what we know and what do we really need to know and share with our community, so that the communities can see some of the good work that the police are doing. Some of the work that, for example, people like my colleague Gurmit are doing, for example, if Gurmit was to leave her post, God forbid, some of that work will be lost. We want to make sure that there is a holistic approach to sharing the information that we have, but we need to professionalize the community so that it is able to scrutinize what we do.
Thank you, David. It's some really important points and messages that you've actually just brought up. We've got so many questions coming in. I'm going to now go over to our dear friend Mufti Ahmed Sab. Mufti Sab, I'm going to hand over to you just so you can highlight some of the key things around the Nottingham, the questions that you've got from the Nottingham Mosque as well.
Thank you, Farooq, for that. Okay, yeah, so just before I move on to the questions which we received from some mosques in Nottingham, I just wanted to make some reflections on some of the really, really good and useful comments my panelists have mentioned today. So, for example, Paul, you mentioned about the hostility towards Muslims is on an organized level. And that means obviously that we have to, as a Muslim community, we have to be a bit more organized as well in reaching out to the police. So it's a two-way engagement. So whatever the Muslim community can do to reach out to the police and vice versa, that because it's on an organized level, so we have to be a bit more organized as well. And I think I really like, Elizabeth, what you mentioned about stats only tell part of the story, and the personal accounts and how the experiences are not really captured by those stats. So if police forces can recognize that, that would hopefully create more passion in dealing with the community. And I think, John, what you talked about making again personal relationships, and how you mentioned about the story of your the mosque in your borough, in your ward, and how you were kind of like a bit of a control freak, but even that resulted in a good relationship, and how that actually works in your favor. And also, I totally agree with you Lee on this, that a lot of work is being done behind the scenes, and sometimes we need to be a bit more vocal about what work is being done, that the police are doing behind the scenes. And I know in Nottingham, because I'm very much involved with David and Gurmit and the PCC about this, so a lot of which David just talked about the scrutiny panel and the consultative group, and all the discussions and the dialogues the police have had with the communities, different communities, Muslim communities, minority communities. And again, Lee, you're right, not many people will know unless they're in that circle. So again, my message would be that don't discount, this is generally to the Muslim community, don't discount the police for not doing anything if one is not aware of it. However, I fundamentally believe that there's still a lot of work which needs to be done, and what is done is still minuscule to what should be done. And finally, I just wanted to say thanks to David for mentioning about how Islamophobia should not be a political issue. Rather, it should be a moral issue, and it's a matter of principle and ethics. And if you can all recognize that, and the importance of having a platform, which I believe the scrutiny panel is working towards, a platform of where the community can express discontent and concerns. So as long, and I think that's one thing I mentioned right at the beginning, my opening comments was, if there's a structure to, a clear structure for the community to escalate their concerns, then that goes a long way to build relationships. So finally, just one comment from myself before I move on to the questions is that, David, you recall this, approximately about 5-6 weeks ago, we had a meeting with the PCC, and this was part of the scrutiny panel. And one of the points which was reinforced many times by different members on that panel or of that group was that there's enough data on hate crime, there's a lot of data on hate crime, policies are also there, but it's about implementation. So I think for me, at least in Nottingham, where the focus should be on now is not collecting new data, is that what are the stats and what are the ways to finding out more information. Rather, it's about implementation. So for example, the first responders from the police force, how they deal with issues, you know, on the ground, how the interaction is with the community. So it's a lot of it is about implementation. So I think the information and the data is out there, but it's about implementation. So those are just a few comments I had before I go on to the questions. So thanks to all for bearing with me on that. So the first question I have is for Gurmit, and one of the participants today has also asked a question very similar to this. And so the question is, statistics show that most Islamophobic attacks are targeted at women. What provisions have been made by the force to enable Muslim women to report such crimes with confidence, and also have cultural sensitivities taken into account? Secondly, what assurances, if any, are given to victims that their reports will be fully investigated without prejudice? So these are two questions, and these two questions have also been asked in today's question by some of the participants.
Okay, so if I just take the first point regards to Muslim women, predominantly and historically, we know a lot of these meetings that it is actually very male attendant. That up when I did my first Muslim consultative group meeting. So there was an active approach, a proactive approach for me to try and reach out to the Women's Network. We in Nottingham have what is known as the Nottingham Muslim Women's Network, We have other female networks, Sisters of Noor, and I believe one of the members or the facilitator, the director, is actually connected as well. So when we talk about reaching out, we do reach out to the Women's Network. When we go back to our Muslim Consultative Group meeting, we did actually see an increase of women in attendance in line with our male attendees, and it was good to see towards the end we were seeing more women representatives than there were male. So reaching out, we are doing a lot of work. There are small networks, and that information, as I said, we collate who those key contacts are within those networks. So if there's information we need to share around hate crime, around the training, Marta, who's also connected to the webinar, she also does work with community groups where they do training, and they class them as hate crime champions, so they can be representing a part of within their groups. So there's a single point of contact for them to make those referrals that do not feel comfortable coming to the police. So hopefully that's given some encouragement that we do reach out to the women, and I think we within Nottingham do fairly well in that.
Yeah, fantastic. So just to clarify that, so the idea here is to focus on Muslim women networks and groups within the community and trying to build a positive relationship with them, and not to just look for them to attend a general meeting where there'd be men and women, because obviously to have a focus and target approach.
Yeah, like I said, we've got to be culturally sensitive as well for those women who do not feel comfortable. So we do reach out, and so we are working towards their needs rather than us saying as a blanket. Regards to the Muslim Consultative Group meeting, those women who will feel comfortable would attend, and they will take that back to their network. So yes, you're absolutely right that it's been culturally sensitive. The second part you spoke about, Ahmed, was around the investigation. I, through my role as community cohesion, and also when I used to work as a neighbourhood policing inspector, the amount of complaints I used to get from the victims saying they've not been updated around the investigation, they don't understand the process. So hope that we've made a lot of improvement around the time that incident is reported. We complete a hate crime risk assessment. We actually explain to the victim about the process of what's going to be happening and what's within our limit, when they should be contacted. Regards to a fair process, I think the question was that how do they know or are confident that their investigation has been treated fairly and without prejudice. There's obviously, if a crime or incident's been closed and they're not satisfied, they have an opportunity to do a request for a review, independent review. So that hopefully gives them a reassurance. In Nottingham, which I'm proud to say, that we also have set up what is known as the NHIP, the Nottingham Hate Incident Performance Panel, with partner agencies where we review hate crime incidents, repeat incidents, and try and go the extra mile and see what else we can do around reducing that risk to that individual. Because as you know, most of these hate crime incidents, if we can reduce the risk of 30% of our repeat victims, we've made an incredible improvement about the reduction. So hopefully that gives us some flavour of how we're trying to investigate and reassure that victim.
Yeah, thank you, Gurmit, because you've explained that if someone is unhappy of how they've dealt with, how their case has been dealt with, then there's certain ways of escalating that. So thank you for that. But obviously, what we had one of the questions from the participants about for trust and relationship to build properly, and there has to be they have to feel that there's an impact or them escalating the case has some effect. So these are some of the ways you've mentioned. Thank you for that. Okay, so my next question is to Paul. Paul's here. So much of the understanding between the police and Muslims tend to be due to a lack of understanding about Islam and cultural sensitivities. Negative media portrayal of Islam results in prejudice, bias, and stereotypical views about Muslims. Police officers are no different in being influenced by the media. So the question is, what is the police force doing to ensure that police officers are being given sufficient training to counter myths and stereotypes, and thereby in their policing, they're not being impacted by their own prejudices?
So this was one of the biggest issues that was raised in the Stephen Lawrence inquiry back in 1999. The cultural change that was needed in the police was probably the hardest and the longest of the tasks. Some of the functional changes came around very quickly. The culture is really difficult. And John Grieve, who still is our advisor, is the senior police officer who was given the job of building the Met's reputation from Stephen Lawrence, and put a massive amount of work in. And his theory is that you can't make friends while the bullets are flying, first off, and that you've got to build relationships with communities in advance so that when times get tight, the relationships are there to help you through the hard times. But also the way you deal with a change of culture is first off to set the rules, and the rules couldn't be clearer. That it has been made clear to police officers that there is no tolerance of racism, there's no tolerance of racial bias. Actually saying that helps to control behaviour. To change attitude is much harder. So what we've done over the years is try to set about how you convince people with the kind of comments that we heard earlier from Lee and John about sort of how you break down those barriers, is really kind of explaining why it's important and why it helps you to be a better police officer, to understand your community and be able to get on with the community in a way that doesn't cause offence. And our communities are really diverse, but the progress that's been made over those years really can't be overstated. We've got a number of metropolitan colleagues here, and the Met Police record more hate crime than any country in the world outside England. That is a phenomenal success, and that comes around from breaking down those barriers and the work to recover that reputation, which has been a generation. It's seen me through my career. I joined the police force in the 80s, where racism was tolerated in the locker room, but wouldn't be now, and it can't change overnight. There's a massive piece of work to be done, and there's still more we can do. Sort of examples from other communities. There's a document produced by a civil society group called A Police Officer's Guide to the Holocaust and A Police Officer's Guide to Judaism, which can be handed out, and documents to explain why communities behave the way, why they believe what they believe, and kind of things like that we can do more of, but it's a continual process.
Yeah. So is there anything which you are involved in terms of Islamic awareness training or training around cultural sensitivities? Because I know in Nottingham, Gurmit Kaur, you have something for the new cadets. So every so often they are given a training, and and I've been invited to speak to the cadets as well. So is there something which you have some kind of training, diversity training, which new cadets or police officers regularly attend, which gives them an opportunity to engage and sometimes ask some very hard questions? Because at the end of the day, police officers are human beings. They read the media. They also will have some questions. So if they have an opportunity to ask those questions and gain understanding through some accurate sources, it may go a long way.
Sure, I'll give two examples if I may, and both of them are about relationships with civil society groups. So Remember in Srebrenica, who most people will be aware of as an organisation, do some fantastic work in helping in the same way as some of the Holocaust education groups do in relation to the Holocaust. They use the backdrop of the tragedy of the genocide in Srebrenica to take police officers and to take other individuals, and it's a fantastic kind of experience, not a pleasant experience, but a fantastic experience in showing how genocide comes around and how the degradation of society can lead to genocide if the people who are there to intervene can't intervene. And the whole lesson, when it's with police officers there or when it's with officials there, is about you are the safety net between a societal breakdown that we see all over the world and genocide, and what can you do to be the difference. So we're doing work kind of on that genocide prevention across the world with many kind of different actors. So at a top level, I would suggest that was a really fantastic kind of version of breaking down those barriers and helping people understand. And then some of the day-to-day work we do with our other key partners like Talmama, sort of we build a relationship. Talmama have some of the same challenges that we've talked about in the chat about the difficulty of reaching different parts of the community, but are a fantastic resource built on multi-faith kind of backgrounds, but recognising the fundamental human rights. And the relationships that we built up with Talmama enabled us to, within 48 hours of the Manchester Arena attack, for us to be deployed in Didsbury and Islamic centres and talking to community groups, standing partners, standing next to each other, being able to take those messages where the community are most exercised, where the community are most scared, where the kind of tragedy is most fresh in the mind, and having those relationships take us on a permanent journey. So we're always interacting with their work and vice versa to help break those barriers down wherever the opportunity arises. And if people have got ideas outside the chat who've got ideas about how we can break them down, I'm more than happy to be the conduit into police colleagues to kind of try and move them forward.
Thank you, Paul, for that really generous offer, because I think it's important. All the panelists have talked about the importance of community relations and engagement, and Paul has offered that if anyone has any, he's doing great work, but if anyone does have any other ideas which can further this, then he would be really happy to hear about it. And then you can let us know as well, and all members and panelists can benefit from that. Okay, moving to the third question, David. We're running very short on time, so if I could kindly ask if this 90 seconds for you, David, on this one. So a 2017 report by the Government Social Mobility Watchdog found that Muslim men and women are being held back in the workplace by widespread Islamophobia. What measures are the police taking to ensure that discrimination is not taking place within the workplace setting, and what discipline mechanisms exist to tackle workplace discrimination? So David Shire, so this is essential about Islamophobia within the police force. We would all love to see more Muslim police officers, because that helps again with the image of the police. But if there is some kind of discrimination generally within the workplace, so what can you say about this to give more reassurance to the Muslims?
Okay, I mean, this is more of an officer's question rather than myself. I want to speak about this in generality in terms of discrimination, because there's a lot of work that I've done around discrimination locally. The police officers face two kind of challenges. The first challenge is to do with the generality of discrimination in society. That it is not just limited to the police; it's all in all the places in terms of discrimination at work and discrimination in society. So they face that just like everywhere else. And the second issue is the trust and confidence that comes about from either historical relationship with those communities, particularly the communities of interest. In this particular case, we're talking about Muslim communities, that they need to build that relationship. So consequently, when officers from the Muslim community are recruited to the force, they face the challenge of having to deal with the normality of working in an environment that is considered hostile by the communities that they're serving or they come from. So it often, when an ordinary person who has a complaint about discrimination, say if you work for local authority or the NHS or anywhere else, you have a social capital outside the employer to be able to get the support for what you do. And I suspect that when I speak to the Black Police Association, which obviously some of the colleagues in the Black Police Association are from the Muslim community, when they speak, is that there isn't that social capital in the community that you can call up to say, look, I need support. And that's where I think from the community perspective, we need to give additional support. And one of the things that we're trying to do with the listening group, I think we discussed this at this listening group in the past, that we need to get the Black Police Association to be networked to the Black workers groups outside the police, so that you're not just talking to the police officers, so that you get that additional support.
Yeah. Thank you, David. And I'm happy you mentioned about the BPA, so Black Police Association, because I believe last year, the year before last, approximately 2 years ago, I spoke at the BPA, which was held in Nottingham. And I recognize what you're saying, that because so some Muslim police officers, if they face discrimination at work, or if they are having some issues at work, the support they would really generally get from their own families and the communities is not there, because the police force as an entity and as an institution is seen hostile by the Muslim community, so they don't really have that support. So I really welcome your comment that additional supports need to be given because they have additional challenges. Okay, the final question we have, and that's for Lee, for yourself here. So the final question is: we know that the lack of trust and confidence in the police results in underreporting of hate crime. Some policing policies undermine this trust and confidence, which is essential for community relations. What mechanisms are in place to ensure that Muslims are not unfairly profiled or over-policed? What complaint procedures are there to deal with disputes in such scenarios? So yes, talking about, so the question has been put in a chat, so if you want to focus on that, if you want to look at the text of the question, then that's okay. So yeah, so just 2 points on there. Muslims feeling that they are unfairly profiled or over-policed. What mechanisms are there to ensure that doesn't happen? And if there is a feeling and discontent, so what mechanisms are there for someone to settle these or to deal with these disputes?
I think the main thing to remember is that there's a lot of perception rather than reality in some cases. And in my 24 years of being a police officer, I think I and people I work with have treated everybody the same, and I've not experienced that. But I may have been lucky. I may have been in areas where we've had people that maybe dealt with people differently. It's very difficult to really quantify the being treated differently. But what I would say is, if anybody is treated differently, to definitely report that, or if they feel they've been unfairly treated, they should report that, because all of us as police officers are here for the community, and that's the only reason we're here. And if we're not treating them well, then we need to know about that. And I know that me and my colleagues are sat here on this webinar. We all want to be seen as professional officers. We want all of our forces to be seen as professional. So if that's not being done, we're equally as embarrassed by that. So that needs to be highlighted. And for the community out there listening, don't be afraid to question or complain about officers, because we want the best people out there doing the job. If they're not doing it, we need to know about it.
So what's one of the ways you can give us some advice on how to escalate? So if there's a scenario where someone feels that they've been unfairly treated during an arrest or anything, or profile or over-policing, a community feels that they're over-policed. So what ways and avenues are there for them to escalate this concern? As you mentioned, I agree that a lot of it is not reality, maybe perception, but we can only get to the bottom of this if there's some kind of investigation or there's some discussion around this.
Well, most forces have a process and a link on their websites to make a complaint. So that's the easiest way to do it. Everybody, I think most people have access in one way or another to websites, and all forces will have a complaint system on there. And I would say to anybody who does want to, and they can't find the right process, just to contact one of their local officers if they're happy to do that.
Okay, thank you, Lee, for that. So yeah, it gives you some clarity on if you do feel that you have some concerns to escalate, what are the best ways to do that. Okay, thank you, Farooq, and all the panelists for this segment of mine. I'm going to hand it back to Farooq for the closing comment. Thank you, Farooq.
Thank you so much, Mufti Sahib. Again, it's been brilliant having you on board. I actually really wanted Mufti Sahib as a panelist just for everybody's perspective, because he's got such a deep experience working with the police, and he's done a lot of work over the years on this, and I'm really happy that you agreed to come on board. Thank you for that. Now, we have gone way over time. I've got so many questions that I've been looking at on the side of my phone for various panel members. I'm very mindful it's Friday, so I don't want to take up too much more of your time. There's one question I will ask, because it was the first one in, and it's actually been asked by two people. So it's the same question. I'm going to roll this up in one, and that's originally from an Irfan Malik and Fahim Anwar as well. As British Muslims, I'm going to direct this question, Paul, I think, and Lee, please, it might come over to you as well, but at Paul, for yourself, as British Muslims, we are exposed to Islamophobia in various forms. However, there are also incidences of hate in the UK between different sects in Islam, intra-Muslim hate crimes. What can the panel suggest to improve relationships between different branches in Islam? It's a difficult question, but from a policing perspective, I'd like to direct that at you initially, Paul, and then I'll probably finish off with Ahmed from Scotland to answer this as well. If I could come to you first, Paul.
Okay, so for me, the most important thing is that first principles, that we all have the same rights to live a life free from targeted abuse. So sectarian abuse is a hate crime. Hate crime against somebody because they leave a religion is a hate crime. Hate crime against somebody within a religion who's gay is still a hate crime. And the reality of it is everybody needs to understand that our obligations, and it isn't just a gift, it's a legal duty that we have, is to protect everyone equally. So that key message is one that needs to go everywhere. Having said that, the kind of more isolated, the more of a minority within minority communities that somebody is living in, often the harder it gets. And getting those messages out to people within that minority of the minority is amongst our toughest challenges. We've made some strides with social media, which is the cause of many of the problems, but the answer to lots of them as well, and that we can target individuals. But we just have to work harder for those who don't feel that the majority minority is representing their views. We need to be accessible, they need to be accessible, and we need to overcome those barriers. So kind of getting those specific messages really important. What we have a mantra that sort of with all of our partnerships, everybody who is a formal partner of the police nationally will have agreed to our mantra, which is, if you can condemn all hate crime, you're part of the solution. If you can only condemn some, you're part of the problem. And we won't engage as partners with people who are part of the problem. So for anybody who shares our ideals, anybody who is willing to stand up for the rights of somebody who's different to them as well as for their own rights, then they're partners. So organisations like Talmama have signed up to those ideals. And the more they live by those ideals, the more hostility they get from some corners of the community. And we just have to stand shoulder to shoulder and keep saying those same messages and just keep trying to find the roots in to the communities or the parts of the communities who don't feel they're served by the main infrastructures.
Thanks, Paul. I'm going to now throw this back over and we're going to go up north a few hundred miles to Ahmed in Scotland, just for your final comments on this, because I know you deal with this. What is the best way, do you feel, and we've had the police perspective now from a Muslim perspective, on how to deal with intra-Islamic Islamophobia, for want of a better phrase?
I think, thanks. That's a very, very important question anyway. And I guess for Muslims, that shouldn't even exist in the first place, because it's always kind of very sad. We tend to find it among Muslims, but there's no place in Islam when you come to talk of intra issues among Muslims, because this is where the Holy Quran completely stamps it out. We claim we all follow the Holy Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and this is his lifestyle. He had what the Jews were there, the Christians were there, the Muslims were there, and there wasn't any kind of division. Everything was so clear. So there's no place here. I don't even understand why we should even be talking about it 1,400 years after he has come. But that simply tells us that we Muslims have actually moved from the right path. We simply have to go back to what the Holy Quran is simply telling us. There's one single verse that will deal with this, and that is La ikrah fi din. There's no compulsion in the matters of religion. Lakum dinikum waliya din. To yours, your religion, and to my religion. So you have your religion, I have my religion. It's just like we go to the pizza shop. I want a tomato topping, you want an onion topping, you want whatever topping you want. Why should we fight? We sit down, we laugh, and we laugh and we enjoy the meal. So when it comes to religion, why should we be fighting? Islam has got a simple solution to it, and that is love one another. You can never love, or you can never be a true Muslim until you love for your brother what you love for yourself. Would you hate your brother? Would you hate yourself? The answer is simple. Let's go back to Islam. And that is why the promised Messiah has come to guide us onto the right path. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ahmed. And I think we've got so many questions that we've got backed up here, but I'm mindful that we've taken up everybody's Friday afternoon. And the minute you mentioned pizza, I think we all safely started turning off, unfortunately. But I want to just bring in, lastly, before we finish off, I just would like to bring in the chair of the Anti-Muslim Hatred Working Group, Akil Ahmed, for a few words from her really on how she sees today's event on and the next medium term to long term future of our relationships with the police and the Muslim community.
Hi everybody, Assalamu alaikum. Thanks so much, Farooq. First of all, I just want to apologise. You might hear my children in the background because they're all home from school and they're very excited. So if you hear any screaming, that's my son probably. And I don't want to keep you for too long. I just wanted to say a huge thank you to all of the panelists today. I think the conversations that we have had have been so important and they've been very rich conversations, and it's been great to hear perspectives from communities and also from the police, not just from London, but from around the country. And I think the key thing for me is that, you know, as chair of the independent members of the Anti-Muslim Hatred Working Group, the key thing for me is that anti-Muslim hate crime, unfortunately, is increasing. So even if more people are reporting, which is fantastic, it's also increasing. And it's not just anti-Muslim hatred which is increasing. We're seeing it across the board, unfortunately, across all minority groups. We've seen how Black Lives Matter has sort of took center stage during the pandemic, and there's been a lot of focus on it, but also, you know, the kind of downside of that is that there's been an increase in anti-Black racism as well. And it goes for our Jewish communities and Sikh communities. And so hate crime is increasing. We all need to be on the front foot in terms of not only responding to hate crime and hatred, but also working together to strategically try and stop, you know, the people who wish to divide us, the people who you know, the haters, if you like, from succeeding and undermining, you know, the cohesion that we've built up in this country, the resilience that we've built up. And a lot of that we saw during the pandemic and during lockdown through positive work. And I think in terms of our relationship with police, I think, you know, there's been so many examples of best practice that's come out during today's webinar, which ideally I think we'd like to see replicated, not just, you know, in London, but across the country. So the best practice we've heard from London, the best practice we've heard from Nottingham, Leicester and other places, I think it'd be fantastic to see that replicated around the country. And I think we're definitely going to be taking up a lot of the suggestions that have come out from today's webinar. We'll be taking those up and working closely with Paul and others and everybody on this panel to try and make sure that actually some of those things get implemented. But and a final big thank you to you, Farooq, and to you, Mufti Ahmed, for organising today's webinar and for bringing on such a stellar lineup of superstars to share with us their experiences, perspectives, and best practice.
Thank you, Akila, and thank you for behind the scenes to Roxana as well, who's diligently worked really to put this, bring this thing together. But I want to, on a personal note, before we go, thank you everybody. Thanks for bearing with us today. It's such a massive first step in having you all on board. It's a huge, very sensitive subject, but the fact that we're all here discussing it, talking about best practices, as Akila has just mentioned, shows we all care about the end result, that we want to try and tackle it. And my last bit is I want to end it on a small saying of the Prophet of Islam, peace be upon him, who once, when mentioning about making sure that all of your details are taken care of when you're handling any matters, he spoke of the fact that Muslims have complete and utter reliance in the will of God, and they leave everything to him, full trust in him. But he did say, even with that in mind, make sure when you leave your camel, make sure you tie your camel properly. And with that in mind, we say we want to build on these relationships. We want to work really close with you. We have complete trust in our maker, but we also want to build our effective relations, but build on them and take some of these best practices around the country. And thank you, everybody. Thank you, all the panel members. We really apologize. We've got so many questions that have come in, but it's been a fantastic workshop today. And hopefully we will be seeing you all soon. So take care, be safe, and see you all soon. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks very much.
Yes, Assalamu alaikum.